Choose FI, Episode 12, Epic Frugality with the Frugalwoods, how to save 75% of your take-home pay without breaking a sweat.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Welcome to the Choose FI radio podcast. So today we're in the studio. Brad's here with me today, and we have our first guest today. Can't believe it. And we have Liz from Frugalwoods.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. I did not know I was the first guest.
The absolute first guest. We've been teeing this up for a while now, so we're super excited to have you today. All right, real quick, let me just talk a little bit about what the goal is today. We are going to be talking to Liz specifically about luxurious frugality or epic frugality, depending on how you want to look at it. And the idea behind what we're doing is, in this world that we live in, we kind of think about the way to achieve financial independence as having four pseudo distinct silos. One of them is using minimalism or frugality to achieve your goals, and then you have real estate or creating passive businesses. One of those, if you have a really good job or a high-paying job, is really focusing on the tax-efficient component of it. And then lastly, investing. But today, we're focusing on minimalism and frugality. And honestly, some people are just frugal for frugal's sake. But we think that everybody, mainstream America, middle-class America, everybody would benefit just from thinking about minimalism and frugality and figuring out how they can incorporate just a few life hacks in their life. Because once you get the baseline for your cost of living under control, it gives you so much flexibility with what you can do. And Liz has been creating amazing content on frugalwoods.com, and she just released a Uber Frugal Month Challenge, which had over 10,000 subscribers sign up to it. So she is just becoming an absolute influencer in this space. She has some amazing content. She has 2 years worth of content. And today we're going to dig through just a few of those articles to really come away with some great actionable tips that you can use as you pursue financial independence. So Liz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So what we decided to do, first of all, when we were looking at some of your stuff from back in 2014, we started with one of your articles, and it was talking about how you save up to 65% of is that your take-home pay or is that your gross pay? And I think it's even higher than that now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, that's our take home. And it really peaked at around 82%.
Oh my goodness.
And leveled off.
That's amazing.
Leveled off around 72%.
Okay. Oh, you decided to just relax a little bit.
We did. And that's actually an element of frugality being sustainable for the long term.
I think what's so funny about that is when you have your average, middle-class American go in and talk to their financial advisor, the financial advisor is usually trying to convince them to save 4%.
Right.
10%.
Right. And it's, if you save 10%, that's sort of considered to be an extremely high savings.
Let's not do anything crazy.
So Liz, was it an actual conscious decision to dial it back to the mid-70s? I guess A, that's a question. And B, what specific things did you do to change that?
Yes. So my husband and I decided in March 2014, it was a very specific conversation, that we wanted to pursue something different in life. We had been living fairly frugally. We were living in Boston. We'd bought a home a couple years prior, which we planned to turn into a rental, which it is now a rental. And what we came to realize is that we wanted to pursue a radically different lifestyle. And in order to do that, we needed to have more money. And so we started to enact what we called extreme frugality. And in our first month, we cut out absolutely everything that we possibly could. And so that's what my Uber Frugal Month Challenge that you mentioned earlier takes you through. So it took me, 3 years to actually put it together as a challenge, but it is now a challenge. You can take it through my site, and it tracks the steps that my husband Nate and I took in order to get to that 80% savings rate.
I think that's really cool. And one of the things I just thought of when you were saying that, one of the things I was expecting is you're going to tell me you live in this little, or at least that you lived in this super cheap city or place where, and you're telling me you live in Boston.
Cambridge, Mass.
So all the excuses that probably immediately come to someone's mind, oh, well, I live in a really expensive city. I can't do that. And you live in Boston. Yes.
So the top two excuses that are here are, but I live in an expensive city but I have kids. And to that I say, as do I.
Okay.
I no longer live in an expensive city, but I've lived in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Boston, and I have a child, and it's entirely possible to embrace frugality no matter where you live. Now, your degree of savings is going to be different, and it's going to depend heavily on how much you're making and what your long-term goals are, but it's entirely possible to be frugal anywhere along the spectrum.
And Liz, one of the neatest things I think I ever read that you wrote was not only is it possible to be frugal in a city, but you would argue it's actually easier on some levels, right? Because there's a cornucopia of things going on any given day in a city as opposed to some random rural area. Is that
absolutely? Although I now live in a random rural area. I mean, we live in the middle of nowhere, and there is so much happening here that we have to consciously stay home in order to get chores done around the farm because there's so much going on. So to that, I say there are people who are engaged in their community anywhere, and you can find free entertainment and free things to do anywhere. I'm absolutely convinced. New York City or rural Vermont, where I am now.
Nice. Okay, I didn't mean to throw rural America under the bus there,
well,
certainly.
We in rural America, we have, there's a lot to do out here.
I hear that. All right, so why don't we just talk a little bit about what is the difference between someone that has a negative 2% savings rate and someone that has a 75% savings rate? I mean, how are you creating that much space between what your actual cost of living is and what your expenses are? Or do you just have a crazy high income?
So no, the principal thing is actually not about money. It's about what you want out of life. And I know that sounds, a little bit vague, but stay with me for a minute. When you have decided where you want to be in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, it suddenly becomes very easy to line your finances up and to realize how much you're going to need to save in order to facilitate that lifestyle. I think for most of us, we probably don't sit down at 22 and think, oh, what I really want to do is slog through a number of jobs that I only minorly care about until I'm 65 and then retire. We don't consciously sit down and map out our lives in that way. So what I encourage people to do before you even look at your spending, think about what you want. Where do you want to be? Do you want to have children? Do you want to travel? Where do you want to live? Map out that ideal situation and then start looking at your finances.
I love that. Essentially what you're saying is design your life. And I think that's essential. I think what you're making essentially when you do that is a value choice. You're essentially deciding, I can have everything now. I can have the golf club membership now. I can, spend all this money now, have the two nice cars with the car payments now, or I can sacrifice the next 5 or 10 years and I will buy myself freedom for the next 10 or 20 years. So it's a value choice.
It is. And the caveat that I would have to what you said is that it's not necessarily a sacrifice. It's more of a reorientation of how you're spending.
That's
and
fantastic.
It's an emphasis on delayed gratification. So, I didn't set out and say, I want to be super miserable and never spend any money. No, I set out saying, I want to move to a large homestead in rural Vermont and I want to rent out my city home and I want to quit my day job.
That's cool.
And have kids and have all of these other things. And so to me, it was not a question about a sacrifice. When frugality is reaching your goals, it's not at all about what you're giving up. It's entirely about what you're gaining. And what I would say too is that there are different stages of frugality. The first month that my husband and I did this, it was a little bit painful because we weren't going out to eat. We weren't going out for coffee. We weren't going out for drinks, all the fun stuff you do in the city. And I thought, this is not easy. But what we came to realize over the coming months is that as frugality becomes a chosen lifestyle, it becomes joyful. And that sounds absurd. I know. But when you have unlocked the magic of being content and being happy with simple things in life, you're creating yourself up for success over and over again. Because when you can be joyful just with looking forward to a regular Tuesday, you are a vastly happier person than if you're only looking forward to that treat on Friday night of going out. So it's really a wholesale restructuring of where you find joy in life and what creates a meaningful life for you. And I think for most of us, if we're asked, what's most important in your life, we're probably not going to say material possessions. We're not going to say our car or our shoes. We're going to say, oh, it's my family. It's when we get to spend time together. And so what, frugality challenges you to do is to put those things at the forefront, put the time together with your family at the forefront, and let everything else fall away.
You're obviously speaking to a friendly audience here, or at least with Brad and myself, in that Brad identifies 100%. And I'm on that place where I am not naturally frugal. I'm a spender. If you have two people in the family, I'm the spender. My wife is the more naturally frugal. But because I've used this term before, I'm a reluctant frugalist. I get the math and I understand the power of it. What originally did appear to me as a sacrifice, not having that golf membership, how quickly it just becomes the normal and it doesn't feel like a sacrifice anymore. And the freedom I get from not making some of those big purchasing decisions that I would have made in the past, to me, it's incredible, and I would never trade it. And so I understand exactly what you're saying, and I can see how you take one step, and then you take another step, and then you take another step, and you look back and you wonder how you could have made all those really stupid decisions in the past because you're so extraordinarily happy with where you're at that moment.
Absolutely. And I also encourage people, don't berate yourself. You did what you did in the past. Just move forward. That, there's no value to be had in being concerned. I know people who kind of add up and sum and total, I could have saved all this money over the years. And I'm like, well, but it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So move forward, and just enact that feeling going forward. And so when my husband and I started on this very specific day, in March 2014, we never looked back. We never said, well, let's wait until next week because, this weekend we have plans. We actually canceled our plans for that night and just started right away. So it's start now, don't look back, and put yourself on a path to strategically and decisively pursue your dreams. I hear from some folks who are like, well, I quit my job. This is great. And I'm like, well, what is your plan? So I'm not one for throwing caution to the wind, but I am one for taking that strategic, decisive action and being very deliberate in the decisions that you make with spending and also with your career.
Liz, I'm so interested. So March 2014, essentially you're describing it as pulling a Band-Aid off, right? You're changing your life wholesale. Mm-hmm. Talk us through that month. I've never asked you this before when we've met in person, but I'm so endlessly curious. What happened in that first 1 to 3 months?
Sure. So the first thing I have to share is that my husband and I have always been pretty frugal. We were able to buy a home in Cambridge, which is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country, when we were 27. So that gives you an indication. We had been saving furiously for that down payment since we were 23. So we had always been frugal, but not to the level that we needed to be in order to get to financial independence, because we have both always worked for nonprofit and mission-based organizations. And so our salaries were good, very good, but not at the level of an investment banker or something along those lines. So in that first month, we really started to examine our expenses holistically. And strange as it sounds, we had never sat down and looked through how much we were spending every month, which is now to me just seems ridiculous that we'd never thought to do that. But a lot of people don't. You spend money, fine. It comes in, it goes out, So what I encourage people to do after you've made that goal setting decision and had that goal setting conversation with your partner, if you have a partner, track your expenses in a very real way, not just I think I spend X, because if you estimate, you will always underestimate. I still underestimate. Every single month I publish my expenses on the blog, and I'm always shocked. I'm like, oh, we spent that much? How could that be? And my husband's like, you spent this money. How do you not remember that?
Seems pretty simple.
Yeah. He's like, it's right here. I'm like, that's impossible. I couldn't, and it's, so I think we have a tendency as humans to underestimate. We always think we weigh less. We always think we spend less. We always think we're taller. So,
I give myself that extra half inch every time.
Always. We all do. So divest yourself of these assumptions and just use an expense tracker. So use Personal Capital. That's what I like. Or use Mint. use a spreadsheet. I really don't care what you use. And look at exactly what you're spending. And then from that, Nate and I categorized our expenses. So what's fixed and mandatory, and then what's discretionary. And what I call fixed mandatory are things that can't be changed easily. So things like your mortgage or your rent, if you have student loan payments, those are things that can't be changed easily. Everything else, groceries, that's all discretionary. So anything where you have any flexibility over the dollar amount, groceries included, that's where the work can be done. So we started with those discretionary expenses and went down one by one and figured out what can we just totally eliminate. So in other words, what do you not need for your survival? We did not need restaurants. We did not need bars. We did not need coffee shops for our survival. So those all went immediately. This is a good time to evaluate all of your subscriptions. So anything that is coming to you on a repeated basis that you are paying for, like a gym membership or a wine of the month club. Do they have it?
I'm sure they do.
I don't know. That sounds pretty good to me. But if you have it, you need to get rid of it. Anything that you can easily eliminate, you just take that off. You don't even think about it. You just remove it. And then we did really intense work with our groceries and with other sort of necessary spending like transportation.
I was noticing that, we actually just recently did one on, we called it quote unquote, the ultimate Costco meal plan, and trying to get a couple to eat for around $300 a month. And I happened to notice when I was digging through your site that you kind of had something similar, and it looks like we've kind of come to the same place, but I would be interested just to hear a little bit about how you tackled the groceries.
Oh, sure. So that was a big one for us. We love food. And my husband loves to cook. Thank goodness, because I am a terrible cook.
Pop-Tarts.
So it's really bad. So he is our chef, and he's a great cook, and he loves good ingredients. And so we were buying all kinds of nice, fancy salmon and arugula and great things. But I was also buying a lot of packaged stuff because Trader Joe's has like all these really tasty packaged things. I don't know if you've been in there.
Preaching to the choir.
It's really tough. Like, I can't even go in there anymore because I'm like, oh, yes, I need these pumpkin-covered spice
My wife's favorite thing is the unsweetened dried mango. It's like the only place you can get it, and it's actually a crazy reasonable price, which is the common theme with Trader Joe's. Wow, this is surprisingly affordable.
Like the cheese section, I mean, I'm down like $50 just in the cheese aisle. This is before I even get to the wine. So that had to stop. So part of it is where you're shopping. I have a tough time because I thought I was being frugal because I wasn't going to Whole Foods, right? False. So I found a discount grocery store, which did not tempt me. It's a regional chain, Market Basket. If you're in the North, you absolutely must shop there. But there are other discount chains across the country and around the world. Aldi's is one. I think it's Lidl in Britain. I've heard from readers that, there are chains that are known for providing discount foods. So go there, or Costco. Costco is also good. And then focus on bulk raw ingredients. So anything that comes in a package, anything that's pre-made, pre-cooked, it's going to be more expensive. So we make our own bread. We make our own hummus. We make our own pasta sauce. All of this is made from scratch. And cooking from scratch has a number of benefits. It tastes better, first of all. It really does. It's better for you because you're controlling the ingredients and you're not adding the immense amounts of sugar and salt that are in packaged foods. And it's much cheaper per serving. And you also have the advantage of never running out of food, which is a good thing when you live where I do and can get snowed in and actually not be able to leave your property for days. It's not relevant for a lot of people, but it is for us. So having a pantry of kind of bulk raw ingredients, flour, onions, olive oil, things like that, you can create a meal at any time from the foods that you have on hand.
You have 10 bullet points written down on how we save 65, or now I guess it's 75% annually. Maybe we could just walk through a few of those. Did you have that there?
Oh, gosh. I should pull it up, though, because that was a number of years ago, and a lot has happened since then. And so it's highly likely that I've forgotten what I wrote. So hopefully I agree with what I wrote.
All right, let's see if you agree with what you wrote.
Does Liz agree with Liz?
Does Liz agree with Liz? All right. Number one, we don't have any debt other than our mortgage.
Still true. What I would say about that, I have a couple comments on that. So debt is bad, but not all debt is bad. And I think it's important to be cognizant of that when you're trying to grow your wealth. If you have a mortgage with a nice low interest rate, I think the mortgage on that house at the time was like 3.7%. And, so if you have a nice low interest rate, having a mortgage is completely fine. And you guys can feel free to disagree with me because there are a lot of different opinions on this. But where I come down is that you're going to see a better return on your money if it's invested. If you put all of your money into your house, it's a relatively illiquid asset. And you're essentially sort of putting all of your eggs into one basket. And although you might be mortgage free, if you don't have any other assets, you've really limited the growth potential for your money. If you have tons and tons and billions of dollars, which you probably don't if you're listening to this, then sure, pay off your mortgage. That's fine. But if you're looking at how to utilize and leverage, a limited amount of cash, which I think most people fall into that category, think very hard before you put all of your money towards a mortgage with a low interest rate.
I think that's fantastic advice.
Oh, you guys aren't going to disagree with me? Darn, I was like all ready to.
You're ready to, yeah. Both of us have kind of walked through that thought process, and depending on, especially in the low mortgage rates.
And it's tough because, for people like my husband and I, we could afford to pay down both of our mortgages, right? So every now and then I get that like, oh, maybe we just do that and it'll just feel so good.
I definitely struggle with that as well as far as paying down our mortgage. Similar boat. To me, it's so psychologically satisfying.
Exactly.
But like you just said, the math just doesn't work. I always come back to it and it's like, oh man, I would love to pay that off. But it's the math of just investing that money and presumably getting a larger return compounded over many years. And also opportunity cost, right? I mean, if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in quote unquote equity in your house, it's just sitting there. I think people say, oh, it's costing me nothing to live here. But hey, you have $300,000 sitting tied up that you can invest. And that's often, opportunity cost is often left out.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a good hedge against inflation. It's just a good aspect of a diversified portfolio, I think, as long as you have a low interest rate, which if you bought in the last, number of years, you should have.
And a fixed interest rate.
That's a really good point as well. Yep.
Number 2 on here, we spend very little on entertainment.
That is so true. We really spend about $0 on entertainment because I find over and over again that there is so much free entertainment that it's ridiculous. So at the very base level, we have a Roku, and so we're able to watch television for free. We also don't watch that much TV, but we do have, free television there anytime we need it. We listen to the radio streaming over the web, so that's free. We listen to Pandora for music, which is also free. So that's kind of the traditional entertainment sector. I also find the internet is an endless source of entertainment. Anything you want to research or read about, it's right there for free. So we do have internet, so that's an expense, which I guess you could consider as an entertainment expense. And then in terms of traditional forms of kind of going out and about for entertainment, we don't eat out. For a while, we did not eat out at all. We never went to restaurants. Now I would say we probably eat out once a month. That was kind of something we added back in. It's fun. We enjoy it. So once a month feels about right and is a pretty insignificant hit on the budget overall. We don't go to movies. I don't think we've been in a movie theater in like 10 years. I have no desire to go to a movie theater because I want to sit on my own couch and like eat my own food, drink my own wine. Cuddle with my dog. To me, the value proposition of a big screen is not very alluring. We don't pay for concerts or shows or anything like that. We find plenty of free entertainment to partake of. And we also have created a lot of really frugal habits and hobbies. So we love to hike. One of the reasons why we moved out here to the woods is we hike every day and we're able to just hike right outside our front door. We snowshoe, we sled. We really are able to enjoy the outdoors to the fullest, which is fantastic free entertainment. We get together with friends a lot and we have potlucks and we hang out and the kids play and it's free and it's wonderful. And then with having a child, there are tons of free kids activities, even out here in the middle of nowhere. So we go to free library play groups. We go to song classes. Song classes? Is it a class when she's 1.5? I don't know, but it's free singing. And then I host a lot of play groups in our home. So I really feel no need to sign her up for expensive classes at this stage.
So the interesting thing there, you said you spend very little entertainment, but that's not the same as not having any entertainment. In fact, it almost sounds like you've made it the challenge to figure out countless ways to create or have entertainment for free. And what I loved about that is bringing your social group in, bringing your neighbors and including them in these frugal and these free and these healthy activities that y'all do together. I think that's very, very cool.
Absolutely. You know, what I find is that when you start inviting friends over to your home instead of going to a restaurant, they are thrilled. They're like, this is fantastic. We don't have to get a babysitter. We don't have to make a reservation. We don't, it becomes a lot easier. And I think you're able to build deeper relationships with people when you have them in your home and you're really sharing your lives together.
Number 3, we take our breakfast, lunch, coffee, and seltzer. And I think if I remember from your blog, seltzer is your ultimate life hack. Is that fair?
It's a pretty good life hack. I actually asked my husband before this show, it's like, what's our best life hack? He's like, oh, it's the seltzer, obviously. So this is a great example of luxurious frugality. We love seltzer. And so my husband figured out a way to hack our SodaStream system so that we have seltzer for, extremely, extremely cheap. And yes, so when we were both working in an office, neither of us are in an office anymore. But we took all of our food to work every day. It was such an easy habit to you buy coffee at work and then mid-morning you're like, oh, I need a muffin. And then you buy lunch. And then in the afternoon, you're like, oh, let's go get some more coffee. And so, you're spending like $20, $30 a day in food. And what I challenge people to think is do you really want to be paying to work every day?
Yeah. How boring.
How boring. So just take your own food, people. It's, And when I was pregnant and starving all the time, I would go into work with it was like a duffel bag of food and people would stare at me.
Just have to survive.
I ate it all. I was thrilled. It was fine. So it's really possible kind of at any stage. And my husband biked to work every single day and he took all of his food with him. So I've heard both of these excuses. I'm pregnant or I bike. You can take your food.
You use Costco and Amazon.com for household supplies.
Yes, and I'm so sad. We don't have Costco out here. We have BJ's, which is a Costco corollary, and it works almost as well. But if you have a choice, go with Costco. They really have the best deals. And Amazon. And then we also have a couple other stores out here that I use. So the key there is really just to price compare and figure out where your cheapest options are. So I kind of do the price comparison once, because it's a little bit arduous. You have to look at the price per ounce of the shampoo and all that. Do it once, figure out where it's cheapest, and then just put yourself on autopilot and just buy it there each time thereafter.
All right. We do not have a car payment.
That's correct. Yeah, we've never had a car payment. So at the time I wrote that post, we had a 19-year-old minivan with 240,000 miles or something, which worked just fine. We now have two 2010 cars. We have a Subaru and a Prius, both of which we bought for cash. And as happenstance had it, we bought them about a month apart from each other, 2 months after we'd bought our new home here in Vermont. So it's having cash on hand is a wonderful benefit of frugality, because you kind of never know exactly when your 20-year-old minivan is going to die and you're going to need multiple new cars.
And let's tie that back. One of the reasons that y'all had the flexibility to do that is because you weren't spending every single dollar that came in on the other stupid stuff. You made a value choice to decrease the cost of your food, to decrease the cost of your entertainment, and all these other little life hacks that you implemented to decrease the cost of your seltzer water. And because you weren't spending money on all that stuff, you now have this cash on hand that when you need to purchase a new house and 2 new cars, you can just go out and pay for that cash. You don't have to sign up for the inevitable car payment.
Exactly. And what I would say to that too is it's needing a car is not an emergency unless you live in a very urban area and can get by on public transit, which by the way is what my husband and I did for many, many years. So we were carless for maybe the first 6 years of our marriage because we were living in the middle of cities. It would have been expensive and difficult to have a car. So that was another conscious choice on our part. But needing a car is not an emergency. And you also don't need a brand new car. People say, I need safety and I need all-wheel drive because I live in the country. I need those things too, but I can get them from a 2010 just as well as I can from a 2017 model. So I really encourage people to pursue used cars. When you see the price difference between a new car and a used car that's even just a couple years old, It is incredible. Cars depreciate the minute they leave the lot. This is something I really hope that people will recognize, is that a new car, you all might disagree with me, but I think it's one of the worst financial decisions you can make.
Don't tie up your financial future in something that's going down in value. It's like driving down the highway, throwing $100 bills out the window. Just there's no need for that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Liz, again. Yeah, I mean, we went, I guess when my older daughter was on the way, we bought a Toyota Highlander. I guess we decided in our infinite wisdom that we needed an SUV. But instead of paying $30,000 for it brand new, we walked down to CarMax right down the road and got, I think it had 27,000 miles on it. So essentially new. And it was
brand new.
Right. And it was 15,000. So literally half price. And we've had it now coming up on 10 years and it's still ready to roll. It'll literally be Anna's first car in all likelihood. So we got it for her birth and we'll give it to her someday.
And Brad and I are planning on having another podcast in the future talking about the true cost of car ownership. But just as a bullet point right now, I think, and maybe you'll agree, that sweet spot, if you want to get a new car that's used, is probably about 5 years old. I think that's when the depreciation starts to slow down. Mm-hmm. Number 9, almost, and I've skipped some because we kind of covered it in the process, but almost everything we buy is used.
That is 100% true. The used market, I mean, it follows exactly what we were just saying about used cars. Things depreciate immediately. As soon as they're no longer new, they are vastly less expensive. And lucky for us in the internet age, we can use Craigslist, we can use email listservs. If you're a parent, get on your local parents group because people give away their baby stuff like you would not believe. My daughter's nursery, so every piece of her furniture and all of her clothing was free.
Wow.
I took hand-me-downs. I found giveaways. I found some stuff on the side of the road, which I washed because baby stuff is all imminently washable. So I found this great little swing. I was 9 months pregnant. I'm loading this swing into my car, into my 20-year-old minivan with the totally dented
There is
side.
somebody listening right now that just said she took something off the side of the road. Oh, I'm not listening to anything. This is too much. This is too much. I can't.
She is a frugal weirdo after all, right?
I am. But the thing is, if you come into my home, you would never know that. And you can peruse the photos on the blog because I clean everything. I wash it. Sometimes I repaint it. There's a lot of joy in this. So in addition to it being cheap or free, it's really fun because you never know what you're going to find. And I just got a free coffee table and I'm loving it. And I use it as my daughter's play table.
And how much more fun is that to talk about as a story when someone says, oh, that is beautiful. Where'd you get that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you all about it.
Oh yeah, my friends are like, yeah, we know you found it on the side. They're no fun anymore. I can't even get it in because they know. So I've lost my, my fun conversation starters.
Maybe now they're doing it, huh? They're telling you about what they found.
But there's, I think when we buy something and when we pay full price for it, we have really high expectations for it, right? It needs to be perfect. It needs to last. It needs to look absolutely correct. And when it starts to fall short, because inevitably it's going to, we get frustrated with it. We're like, why does it have a stain? Whereas with my couch, which has endured a lot of baby and dog situations, I don't care because it was cheap for me to begin with. If it falls apart, it's just not that big of a deal.
Frugal Hound can get on the couch. Yeah, you can do that with a new couch.
She does not. She's allowed to, but she's afraid of furniture.
Afraid of furniture.
So she doesn't jump on it. But it's just this idea that we're a lot more content with things that we don't pay for. And we're also a lot happier with things that we build or create ourselves. And this is actually not just me saying this. There was a study done called the IKEA effect that looks into the happiness that we derive from doing things ourselves. When people put together their IKEA furniture, even if it kind of doesn't come out correctly and is a bit wobbly, they are much more content with the result than if they bought pre-made furniture.
Number 10, no buying.
Yes. So before you buy anything, I encourage you to wait 72 hours. So write it down on a list when you first feel that you need it, and then force yourself to wait that 72 hours before you buy it. And in doing this, you will find invariably that you don't buy it. Because a lot of times the things that we think we need in the moment, that need dissipates over time. We experience this sort of jolt of dopamine when we feel like we must have something. And then if we carry through on it and buy it, we continue riding that sort of consumer high. but then need another hit of dopamine a couple days later. And so we buy something else. And so we get ourselves onto this sort of consumer carousel where we're constantly ratcheting up our expectations. And by waiting 72 hours, you're interrupting this cycle. You're putting some space in between making the decision that you want it and then buying it. It's a waiting time. You're really giving yourself the opportunity to breathe and reflect. And what I find, I do this. This is how I manage this in my own life. I write it down on a Google document. I really and truly, I'm actually looking at it right now. I have this list of things.
What's on there right now?
Right now on there is, I really want to get a play kitchen for my daughter so she can stand and play at it.
How many hours has it been on that list?
How many hours? It's been on there for weeks. Because here's the thing. I know that a free one or a cheap one is going to come my way. I can't tell you how many times this happens to me. If you wait and bide your time, you will find sort of a frugal analog for just about anything you're looking for.
So after it stays on there for 72 hours or while it's on there, for that period of time, what questions are you asking yourself to try to determine whether or not to keep it on that list or not?
So the first thing is to figure out if you own something that will serve as a substitute. So I wanted like a little play table for my daughter. And I discovered that I had this end table that's really low to the ground that was just a decorative end table that she could use. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I already own this. And this was after already researching these tables online. You would think I would have noticed this end table, but we just don't always realize the things that we own that can be repurposed in a different way. Then the other thing is if it's a short term, something you need for a short period of time, like a specific tool for a job, see if you can borrow it from somebody. And if you still really feel like you need it, look into whether or not you can find it used.
Liz, I just want to jump in here and say that you've actually impacted me positively with this because I read about the 72-hour waiting period on your site. And I think you mentioned it during the Uber Frugal month as well. And, very specifically, I got an email. I'm on Tim Ferriss's email list, and he sent out about this card game that was, he was really into, and I thought it would be wonderful for my family to play. So I hopped on Amazon. It was $9. So it was a minuscule amount of money. But right. I actually had the thought, what would Liz do? I literally said that.
I can see those bumper stickers taking over the world.
Oh, geez.
So I, walked in to speak with my wife, and Laura and I said, it was right after Christmas, essentially. So we had just gotten some new games, I guess a handful of games to play with our kids. And we're like, do we really need this other game? Even though we've heard it's fantastic, it got great reviews. It's $9, big deal. But we said, no, we're going to shelve that, put it on a wish list. And it's probably a month later, and I have not bought the thing, and I didn't need it. And maybe someday we'll buy it, but that'll be a conscious decision as opposed to just that impulse buy that you talk about.
And I think also, Brad, you're bringing up a great point. It's only $9. And so I think our assumption, and my assumption certainly used to be, it's $9, just buy it. What's the big deal? But the problem is that when we adapt that mentality, that happens over and over again. And in the course of a week or a month, you're then looking at hundreds of dollars. So a fun thing to do is, in addition to putting it on your list to wait 72 hours, start down the amounts and then total up everything you didn't buy over the course of a month or a year or even a day. And then if you want to get really fancy, there's a compounding interest calculator online that you can do, and you can put that dollar amount in and see how much it would return if you instead invested that amount every year in the stock market. And it's usually a shockingly huge number.
I love that. Number 12, we do all of our grooming at home.
Yes, that is so true. So I cut my husband's hair. He cuts my hair. We wash our dog ourselves. We do anything that you might otherwise pay someone to do, we just do at home. And this is a level of both insourcing, which is a key element of frugality, but also embracing imperfection. Life is not perfect. Things are never going to be perfect. And so my opinion is you might as well just not spend money on it and embrace the imperfection rather than spend a bunch of money and be angry about the imperfection.
We're 50% there. My wife cuts my hair. Currently, I'm terrified to touch her hair. But
I have a tutorial. I have a tutorial on the blog. I was also terrified. My husband was more terrified, but it worked and it was completely fine. And it's just, you then suddenly realize this is not a big deal. And also, I don't care that much about my hair.
Well, what I love about having my wife cut mine, now the first time she did it, she did kind of scalp me a little bit on the side. That happened. But once that gets out of the way, now I have this one person that every single month they're getting a little bit closer to what my goal was. And if you're paying to go have it done, inevitably you're going to someone that's never cut your hair before and you're trying to start from scratch. So what I found after 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 haircuts is that I love my haircut. I've never liked it better when I went out. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be this, oh, I'm sacrificing quality. My wife does an amazing job, and she started by scalping me. But, here we are a year later, and it was the best decision. And now it's 20, 30, 40 bucks a month that you don't have to worry about it anymore.
It is also saving you time. I'm a big fan of this.
That's huge.
When you insource things, you save time. You don't have to call and make an appointment, drive to the salon or bike to the salon, wait there, get your haircut, pay your $20. You don't have to do any of that. I mean, it takes me like 13 minutes to cut my husband's hair. We timed it. And it takes him even less to cut mine. So that's a lot of time saved. And I tend to think that time is a more valuable resource even than money.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Liz. And that kind of gets to the busyness that people are always talking about, right? People wear this as a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so busy. People are running around like crazy. We see it with our daughters at school. I mean, half the parents in the class literally don't respond to the simple directions that come back from the teacher every day. I mean, what's going on in their brains? And I kind of question like how people just go through a normal day just being so frazzled. It just seems like such a crazy existence to me. And a lot of it comes down to just not setting priorities to me. This perpetual busyness is just so detrimental psychologically.
It is. And I tend to think that frugality, kind of where I've come with my frugality is much less about money these days. I've kind of got that part down. It's much more about how can I simplify my life? How can I take away the unnecessary busyness, the unnecessary tasks, and just focus on what I want to do in a day, and do that to the fullest. And that's something that frugality will allow you to do, is to really simplify and streamline and let go of a lot of these unnecessary pressures.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And you kind of touched on that earlier when you talked about happiness and just being content with your life. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people either just list from day to day, not knowing what makes them happy or not even contemplating it, I guess. And it sounds like you and Mr. Frugalwoods have been very intentional about your lives, certainly since March 2014, and I imagine predating that. But I guess if you don't mind, I'd love to just pivot for a second and talk about the homestead, to talk about Vermont for a second. And I guess first, in March 2014, since that seems like the seminal moment there, was the decision for the homestead made then?
Yes. So what we realized is that for the last number of years, we'd been leaving the city every weekend to hike, and we'd drive these incredible distances in order to reach mountains that we could hike, and we'd have a wonderful time. Our best experiences were on the mountains, just spending time together, walking around in nature, not buying anything, not consuming any media. And then we'd come home and have to go back to work on Monday, and we're like, oh, this is not how we want our structure of time to be worked out. So we started thinking about, okay, what if we had like a weekend place, a weekend cabin that we could go to? And that advanced into, okay, what if maybe we tried to retire when we were early, like when we were younger, maybe when we were in our 50s or something, and move to the mountains then? And this evolved into this conversation of, why don't we do it now? What's actually preventing us from doing that? Okay, and the answer is money. And so how do we get ourselves into the position where we can live the life we want for the next, 40, 50 years, as opposed to waiting until we're 50 or 60 in order to pursue this?
And how long did you think the timeline would be at that point in March 2014?
So we mapped it out as being probably September 2017. And what happened is that we found our dream property in November 2015, which is coincidentally also the month that our daughter was born. And so
congratulations.
Thank you. We had been looking at places for about 3 years at that point, because we had started looking prior to our sort of extreme frugality conversation. And so we knew this was the property for us. There are a lot of factors that go into rural property buying. It's not just the home, it's the land, it's the quality of the forest, it's the septic, it's the well, it's where you're positioned in the state, what your road is like, what your driveway is like. There are kind of an infinite number of factors as compared with urban and suburban home buying. So all of those factors lined up in this property, and we thought, we have to do this. We have, this is the one. So again, thanks to frugality, it was not a hardship for us to accelerate the timeline and make the decision to buy it at that time and to move in full time in May.
Wow. So you're coming up on a year at this point, right?
I guess so.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's amazing. And now, the way you described the search for the homestead, that actually, if my recollection is correct, that's similar to what you did with your house in Cambridge, right? Didn't you, I guess,
Yes.
search for years and go to open house
Yes.
upon open house? Just, it sounds like an information asymmetry, right? Like you have more information
Yes.
than the market at that point.
That's absolutely, and that's really the position that ideally you want to be in when you're doing anything, buying a home, buying a car. With the internet, you can educate yourself and you can absolutely know what a good deal is and when you found it. And that was how we bought our home in Cambridge. It's a single family home, and we bought it for the lowest price per square foot of that season. And it was not a teardown at all. It was completely move-in ready. Why? It showed terribly. But, and we were able to look past those things and recognize the value based on the square footage, the price per square foot. And so it's really knowing the market of anything that you're getting into and knowing what you're trying to achieve from it. So with our Cambridge home, we knew what we were trying to achieve was something that we could one day rent. And with our home here in Vermont, we were trying to achieve a long-term family home that we'd be living in for many years. So having those goals in mind made it pretty easy for us to pounce when we saw these places. So our Cambridge home, we put in an offer, I think the day after we saw it or the same day. I mean, it was immediate. And then with Vermont, we also put in an offer very soon after viewing it because we knew. And so I think years and years of research, it does two things. It gives you all the information you need in order to strategically and decisively pursue what you want, but it also gives you something to do. It occupies your brain and it occupies your time while you are working towards a goal. It's very hard, I think, to have these long-term goals that are years, if not decades out. But when you are researching towards that goal, you are actively thinking about it every single day. And I loved that. While we were living in the city, I just loved looking at properties and reading about them and learning about septic systems because I felt like I was being active.
That's powerful. I've definitely found that to be the case myself when I'm not actually ready to execute on something, either from a money perspective or otherwise. You can spend that time learning about it, getting more information, and learning is free, or at least it can be. And
Absolutely.
When you're spending your time doing something that's free, you don't have time to spend money, and then you're essentially reaching your goal faster. So that I've definitely realized that is true in my own life in many ways.
That's right. And you're reminding yourself every day of what you want in the long term.
All right. So I'm going to pivot here. Gosh, and this is a little bit tongue in cheek, but you guys, you don't spend any money. You must be so bored.
I know our culture has really designed this paradigm that in order to be sort of entertained and happy, you need to be spending lots of money and, taking your kids to Disneyland and doing all these things. And there's room for that in our lives. And my husband and I, we do travel, we do more conventional entertainment things from time to time, but we really are sort of fighting back against this concept that you need to spend money in order to be happy. It sounds really obvious and sort of flat when I say it like that. Of course, I don't need to spend money to be happy, but think about it. Think very carefully about where your money is going and what you're spending in service of. So one of the great tactics here is frugal substitution. So for anything that you love doing that's really expensive, see if you can find a frugal alternative. I have been shocked at the number of things that we are now able to do for free that we used to spend money on. So I used to pay for yoga classes every week, and these were like $18 a class. And I was taking 3 or 4 classes a week. I was like, this is good. It's yoga. I'm so healthy. But we looked at our budget. My husband was like, oh my gosh.
$3,000 a year.
Yes, in yoga. He's like, I'm glad you're doing yoga, but honestly. And so I went to my studio and I figured out that I could volunteer at the front desk and take out the trash and mop the floor and get free classes.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So I was perfectly happy to do that. And there was a great added benefit there. I made a ton of friends by doing that because I was suddenly really involved in the yoga studio community. So that was one of my first lessons in, don't assume that you have to pay full price for everything.
One of the things you do a great job mixing up really, really in-depth articles with little short articles. And what I loved about this one, Are You Bored, that we were talking about is just a few of these bullet points. You said, we don't worry about keeping up or competing over material goods. We don't do it. My husband and I, we never fight about money. We just don't have fights because we're on the same page, and we don't fret about it. We don't worry about it. We know we have enough because we live way, way below our means. I mean, that is powerful for some people who don't have that worldview. And then below that, you were basically saying, I'm not jealous of people who spend everything they earn. It seems as though they're struggling to find meaning through money. And then for you, money sustains your basic needs: food, shelter, clothing. But it's not a goal in and of itself. You're not hoarding money just to have money. You're doing it to free yourself from the vicious cycle of lifestyle inflation. I think that's really powerful. That's a completely different way of looking at money. And now I'm talking to the audience here. When you look at this, think about the things that we talked about. That nothing that we said is particularly crazy or outlandish. And although you may not do everything that we talked about in this podcast, it's going to be helpful for you long term to see if you can adapt just a few of these things into your own life. Because once you start to go down this rabbit hole, it starts to make sense, and it's empowering. It opens up all these options that you may not have considered. So thank you, Liz, so much for sharing your time with us and going through some of these thoughts with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And finally, what we're going to do, I'm so excited for you. You are going to be our first guest on the hot seat.
Oh, dear.
All right.
Pressure's on.
Yep. Wait for it and go.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right, Liz, question number 1. Favorite blog that's not your own?
It's so hard to pick just one. I really have two.
You only get one? No, you can have two. I'm just kidding. That's fine.
Okay, I love 1500 Days to Freedom, and I also love Kate Flanders. So they cover frugality, and Kate covers minimalism, and it's just done beautifully and written so well.
Oh, Mr. 1500.
Yes.
Yeah, we're interviewing him later, actually.
Well, there you go.
Kate Flanders, I'm actually not familiar with her blog. Can you give us, I know you gave us a 2-line overview, but can you just give us a little more?
Sure. So Kate paid off quite a bit of debt, and in the process really restructured her life and embraced minimalism and found ways to achieve sort of lasting happiness and peace, not through spending money and not through owning things. And her writing is just incredible and so articulate and so thoughtful. It's very inspiring for me to read what she writes.
That's wonderful. And obviously that's high praise coming from you, who, in my opinion, is the best true writer out there in the personal finance sphere. So yeah, that's very cool. No, you are, Liz. You're fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Question number 2, favorite article of all time?
So that would probably be my Joy That Comes When Less Is Enough post. And what that talks about is that the rarity of something's occurrence enhances its enjoyment. The idea behind that is that the less you do something that's very indulgent, let's say having a really rich meal out at a restaurant, the more you enjoy each experience. If you ate that rich meal every single night of the week, your enjoyment would wane. You would start to find fault with it. You would get fussy. You would get picky. But when you do it once a month or once a year, it's an incredible experience.
That's powerful. Yeah. If you eat lobster every day, it starts to taste like soap.
Probably so.
All right. Number 3, I think we actually covered this earlier, and maybe you still agree with that. Your favorite life hack?
Definitely the SodaStream hack. And we have a post on the blog where my husband outlines all of his engineering to hack the SodaStream.
So do you have to be an engineer to do this, or can your everyday guy just do this? Is it difficult?
Your everyday gal or guy could do this. He's got the instructions on there pretty clearly. So,
all right. Very cool. Number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
I think this was not recognizing our long-term goals early on in our marriage. We saved decently, but we could have saved more, and we just could have been more deliberate and focused.
Liz, how many years were you married before the moment in March 2014 where you had that discussion?
Gosh, we were married for 6 years at that point. So that's kind of took us a long time to get around to what we wanted to do with our lives. We got married when we were 24 in 2008, and then this was 2014. So I think I'm grateful that we got married so young, because had we gotten married later, we would be making that decision much later in life. But, I think at 24, we were very focused on what was right in front of us and not thinking more broadly about the long term. So I wish that we had sat down at 24 and said, okay, where do you want to be in 20 years?
Yeah, I wonder how different your life would be today if you had that discussion in 2008. Have you ever reflected on that?
I don't know. I am so not a fan of dwelling on the past that I actually have not thought about that. And we were also very different people than we were at that time. And so I honestly think we probably would have had different answers.
Well, this is kind of tied in, I guess, but question number 5, the advice you would give your younger self.
So this would be to not stress out and to embrace the stage of life that I'm in. When I was younger, I was very concerned with being an adult, quote unquote, and succeeding, quote unquote. And I was not at all thinking about what makes me happy. So I wish I could go back and just say chill out and stop worrying so much. And this is an ongoing struggle for me to really find peace in the present moment and to accept and love whatever stage of life I'm in.
All right. Awesome, Liz. So much for coming on the show today and spending some time with us. This has been a lot of fun. We really haven't even gotten through the tiniest fraction of the content that you have. So definitely would you like to come back on with us and do a couple more episodes at some point where we can dig in through some of your other ideas?
I would love to. That would be great.
Awesome. Real quick, how can people connect with you? How can people connect with the Frugalwoods if they want to check out some of the information that you have and participate in some of the really cool ideas that you have?
Sure. So you can find us at frugalwoods.com, and you can sign up for our Uber Frugal Month Challenge, which is free. Of course it's free because it's a frugality site.
Wouldn't that be awesome if you charged for it?
I know, right?
That'd be way cooler.
You can follow me on Twitter at Frugalwoods. You can find me on Facebook, again, Frugalwoods. You can find me on Instagram, still Frugalwoods. You can email me. It's mrs@frugalwoods.com. So, it's pretty much Frugalwoods across the board.
All right. Awesome. So Frugalwoods it is. Liz, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been great. I've loved this conversation. You would make just an absolutely fantastic co-host. To our audience, for those of you that are interested in checking out Liz's blog, you can go to frugalwoods.com. If you want to get some of the show notes from today's episode with some of the links that we mentioned, you can go to choosefi.com/012. That's choosefi.com/012. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.